It's a great opportunity tonight. We have James Pond, and I tell you what, I just gotten to know James a little bit just this evening here, and tell you what, fascinating story of the way God's moved in his life and his family and their part in the mission that God is doing and the difference they're making for people in such tangible ways. He's the executive director of Transitions Global, lives in Cincinnati, Ohio with his wife, 3 grown children, and so they moved their family a number of years ago to Cambodia and have set up a transition program for girls coming out of human trafficking, and the results and all of it is just absolutely incredible. James, come on up. I'm not going to take any more of his time. Right now, he said they're working in 11 countries, even starting working in this country with some of the systemic problems that are leading to human trafficking. So let's give a warm welcome to James, and he's going to share with us here.
So how's everybody doing tonight? I didn't know they did church on Tuesdays. That's pretty cool. I don't know if any of you guys are young enough, old enough to remember when, they had those T-shirts and it said, like my mom went to Disneyland and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. Well, I was just in Moldova 2 days ago and all I got was a lousy cold. So my voice, if it gives out, I'm going to make a mad dash for the water, so bear with me a little bit. It's funny, if you had said to me 10 years ago that I would be doing what I'm doing right now, I would have told you were absolutely insane. I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps working in intelligence and had an opportunity to travel around the world, experience a lot of different things, see a lot of different things, and I got all of that out of my system. And at 26 years old with 2 kids, I went into corporate America where I could actually make a paycheck. And while I was minding my own business, the world of human trafficking kind of came crashing in on my family and I. And I think you guys will discover this for yourselves, or you've probably discovered it already, but God tends to kind of do that in our lives. Instead of us sort of traipsing through the aisle and discovering what it is that we want to pick and choose, it kind of comes crashing into our lives and we're confronted with it and asked to respond in a meaningful way. And what ended up happening for us was in 2004, we had DVR'd Dateline. Loved watching Dateline, but I was never home when it was actually on. I can't remember when it originally airs, but for whatever day or time it wasn't on, so we had tape recorded it. And that Saturday evening, I remember sitting with my wife and thinking, we're just going to have this peaceful evening and watching Dateline. And it's a 2-hour special called Children for Sale. Now, nothing says romantic date night like Children for Sale. So here we are watching this just kind of unveiling, these young kids soliciting pedophiles and perpetrators for their own exploitation. And I remember feeling sick. And in fact, when it ended, it really felt like this liminal space. Have you guys ever heard that term before? Remember when 9/11 happened, the days that followed that dead airspace, where anything could have happened, and people had extraordinary kindness and clarity and vision for their lives and their families and their relationships. That's exactly what I was having in that moment, that liminal space where God was able to just really speak. And as we sat there, I remember thinking, I know I need to do something, but I almost can't move. I feel paralyzed. So my wife cured me. She elbows me and she goes, "You need to do something about this." Okay. Contacted the U.S. State Department and asked them, I said, "Is this just media hype or is this actually going on?" And the State Department said to me, "Not only is this going on, but this is the one time that we feel that the media has actually underplayed a topic, that it's actually worse than what they were able to portray on television." So they said, what we would suggest to you is that you take a trip to Cambodia and find out for yourself. You need to sit with these agencies, really hear from them face to face what's most needed, and then you can decide how to respond. Now I'm thinking at this point, I have this nice 6-figure salary. I finally got the BMW I've always wanted. I've got the 2 black labs and the 3 kids. I'm pretty set on the perfect American life. So I'm thinking, I'm going to create a family foundation. I'll go to Cambodia. I'm going to find a nice little agency over there that's doing nice work, and I'll set up a fund, and I'll just funnel all my rich friends' money into it, and it'll be good. So I get to Cambodia, I'm meeting with these agencies, and over, the resounding cry was, what we need for an organization to come here and set up an intentional program that can help these girls to heal, a safe place where they can get their lives back together, a place where they can find hope for their futures. And I was compelled that that's absolutely what I needed to do. So I'm having this trip, and I'm emailing with my wife in the evening, like, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm learning, this is what I'm learning. But I haven't said out loud that I really feel like God's calling us to do this. So I'm on the plane flying back, and I'm thinking, how do you have that conversation? You know, like, hey, we're moving to Cambodia. And but God does really work in relationships. And so I get home at 1:30 in the morning. I'm late. I walk in the door, and my wife gives me a hug, and she says, I know we're moving to Cambodia, but we're not talking about this until tomorrow morning. All right. We sat down with our 3 kids that next morning, and we talked to them about the opportunity that laid before us, and that it was a serious one. I think oftentimes we look at charity as something we do with what's left over. And I think that when we start looking at God's understanding of justice and what that actually looks like, what it looks like to free a person, it's not something we do with what's left over. It's what we do with all of who we are. And my kids got that, and we voted as a family that we were going to move. And so a month later, we put the house up on the market, sold everything we owned, including my BMW. And within 9 months, we were standing in an airport with 15 suitcases and a one-way ticket. Now, when we got over there, and this is what I think is profound for me in terms of an understanding, I really needed to get my head around what is going on with sex trafficking and these young kids. Why are these kids at the base root of this problem? Like, what is going on here? And in the last 10 years, I've had an opportunity to travel to 11 different countries and work on this issue. And this is what I found. I found that there's a composite for these young girls. And I think that this should be very telling for us in terms of where we're going and what we're doing with this issue as a whole. So this would be the story of any girl, whether she's in the United States or Cambodia or Brazil or anywhere else. This is the story of her life. By the age of 7, she has been exposed to domestic violence in her home, drug and alcohol abuse. There's been some kind of family dysfunction. Usually by the age of 7, she's been sexually abused by a family member or someone close to her. By the age of 11, she's been sexually assaulted. And by the age of 14, she's been trafficked for sex by a pimp that she either knew or met in the process of escaping from her family. Additionally, you're going to find that she's had educational problems as well as intersections with juvenile justice. So she's had some kind of problems with the law. And here in the United States, what we found is a proclivity of these girls, a large percentage, over 85%, have been involved in our foster care systems. So I get a lot of middle-class mothers that say, oh my gosh, this whole trafficking thing is just so, I'm so worried about this. I'm worried it's going to happen to my daughter. And I can tell you right now that if you have a daughter who's in a loving home and you've taught her to make wise decisions, the last thing you need to be worried about is her being trafficked. What we're talking about is we're talking about a global epidemic of girls that are in a vulnerable state, that are being taken advantage of, and are being horribly abused and exploited. And it's really an industry. Sex trafficking is kind of a really kind term. And it was what the State Department did when we as an industry in 2004, 2005, we said, this is really sexual slavery. This is slavery of the worst kind, and it involves the sexual abuse component. And the State Department said, that sounds really too harsh. We kind of like this idea of trafficking, because we have drug trafficking, we have arms trafficking, so we should have human trafficking. So we use that term. But at its root cause, if we really want to know what's going on in terms of what I deal with every day, it's an industry that is rape for profit. We're talking about a $44 billion business globally that is being made on the backs of children and women around the world. So when my wife and I got to Cambodia, we were thinking, we just need to create this amazing oasis, this place where girls can come and they can heal. So we developed this shelter that we called the Ark. It was the Agape Restoration Center. It was a place where these girls are going to come and heal. It's what Bangkok, still to this day, the U.S. State Department in Thailand actually calls it the Fort Knox of Southeast Asia, because it's this incredible fortress. It's beautiful. Palm trees, swimming pools, computer labs. It was very elaborate. And on the first night we were ready to take intakes, we called all the different human rights organizations and police organizations there, and we said, look, we're open for business. As soon as there's girls, we're ready to do intake. And we took in 19 girls the first night. So these 19 girls came to us, and we quickly realized that we were in over our heads. The majority of these girls were 14, 15 years old, had some severe complex sexual trauma issues, physical issues, and they needed something much different than just a safe place. They needed something that was so intentional and progressive and innovative that it could help them in the process of healing. One of the things that became imperatively important to us in doing this was I have 2 daughters of my own. And the premise was that I wanted to do what I would do for my own daughters. If it wasn't a program that I would put my own kids in, I didn't want to do it. And that meant that the standards had to go way up. So what ended up happening was we evolved this program into 4 core programs that we operate in Cambodia. So the first one is the Dream Home, which you guys saw in that video, and it's a residential treatment program. It's a 2-year program that's very individualized, so it can be longer if it needs to be, and it can also be shorter if it could be. We serve the needs of 13 to 17-year-old girls. So we work with a very young group of kids, and we serve 22 girls in the Dream Home at any one time. And then we operate a step-down program. So girls that graduate go into another program called the Star House. And it's a social work monitored program that helps girls make that transition into independent living situations. So right now in our Star House, we have 4 girls that are actually working as chefs. We have another young lady that's in college for accounting school. And we actually have 9 girls that are slated to graduate high school this next year, and they'll have an opportunity to go to university, which is just powerful. But really what we wanted to do is we wanted to center this on what I believe is God's best. And it was the desire that freedom, and this was one of the core principles that we operated off of, is that freedom without a future is simply another form of slavery. Removing someone from a horrible situation but not giving them something to look forward to creates more problems than you can possibly imagine. And let me give you a powerful example of that. Think about the Emancipation Proclamation that we signed in 1863 that would free blacks from slavery in the United States, right? We said, oh, you're no longer slaves. Well, what happened after that movement took place? Did you guys know that 78% of slaves stayed in their stations because they had no future to look forward to? They didn't even know what they would do with their freedom because there was nothing that was projected for them. And so I believe that it's our responsibility to really help to re-provide those futures. That is a godlike act to give someone a whole new future, a brand new beginning at a new life. That's a powerful thing. So that's what our organization does. What ended up happening, though, is I came from the business world. And in the business world, my boss would ask me every month, how much money are you making for my company? What are the results you're getting for me? And I had to show him in some tangible way how I was benefiting his company. When I got into the charity world, I was baffled because I was like, so what kind of results are you getting? What's your success rate? And charities were like, I don't know, we're just loving people. I'm like, okay, but that's an awful lot of expensive love that's going on here. And so I started digging a little deeper and asking, like, what does success look like? If you're working with a sex trafficking victim, understanding completely this a person. It's a real life, and they're all different, and there's all kinds of complexities. But at the root, what are we doing? Where are we taking these kids? Are we taking them from point A to point B, and can we show that? Or are we just simply playing around with kind of keeping kids in A? We'll love on them, and we'll give them stuff, and then we'll love on them some more. And what I found is a lot of organizations are kind of functioning under this premise. We'll just sort of love them. We're going to just kind of hope that things happen over time. And so I took a little bit of the business acumen I had, and I said, let's start measuring what happens if we do this program. We progressively take these kids through. After they graduate, let's watch what happens to them in that critical first year after they graduate and see what happens. Well, the first year that we measured, 75% of the girls that we stayed in contact with after they graduated were not re-trafficked, re-exploited, or engaged in prostitution. And coming from the business world, 75% is like a C. So I was like, I wasn't happy with myself at a C. And so we've kept pushing. So in 2012, we did this again, not taking each graduating class as a separate class, but taking all of the girls as a whole. So that means the girls that graduated in 2007 and the girls that graduated in 2011 were all counted together. You guys want to know what the success rate was? 94%. Isn't that amazing? It's awesome. It's awesome. Like I was like jumping up and down awesome and like doing an in-your-face thing, you know, like because people said that you can't measure the progress that a human being makes, but you can. You can look at the quality of life that they have afterwards. So we started measuring recidivism, and then we started looking at other things. I started looking at quality of life. Do they have friends? Do they have peer circles? Do they have connection with their family? Do they have connection with their community? Are they giving back? And this is one of the most powerful things that we found is that 70% of the girls after they graduated did something with their life to multiply what they were doing back, right? Isn't that what we want? Isn't that powerful? So we started looking at the girls and saying, well, why are you doing this? Like, why would you give of your own time? And they said, you guys gave us so much hope for our future that when we left, the only thing we could do was want to give someone else that same kind of hope. Isn't that awesome? That to me, that makes it all worth it. So what ended up happening was we started getting these little wins along the way. We were kind of counting and looking and seeing what kind of results are we getting, how is this happening, and we started, I know this isn't a word, but we operationalized everything we were doing. We started writing it down and getting it into processes so that people could take it and use it for themselves. So within several years, we found ourselves in Greece, Bulgaria, Thailand, India, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Canada. And then oddly, I got a phone call that they needed help in the United States. And so we started looking at this issue very seriously in the US. And statistics to me don't mean a whole lot because I don't know that they tell us a whole picture. Statistics range anywhere from that in the United States, there's anywhere from 100 to 300,000 teenagers that are vulnerable to sexual exploitation in the United States every year, to that there's approximately 40,000 minors in the United States that are being exploited in the commercial sex industry. I don't know the accuracy of those numbers. I don't really care about the accuracy of those numbers. What I do care about is the actual lives that are being affected. And one of the things that we know here in the United States is that the commercial sexual exploitation of children, or CSEC, is something that's very real. We've done 4 major citywide studies in Portland, Oregon, Chicago, Illinois, Nashville, Tennessee, and Santa Clara, California. And in each one of those states, we found approximately 150 teenagers just in those near counties that were children that fit that composite that I told you about earlier, that had grown up in these families, been involved in juvenile justice, been involved in the foster care system, and now were being exploited in the commercial sex industry here in the United States. Now, here's what may startle you. If you said, I have $1 million I can give you, where would you use it? I would tell you right now, I'll take it to Cambodia and use it. Because I can do more in Cambodia for those girls than I can in the United States for these girls. And the reason is that we created child laws in the 70s and 80s that were meant to protect children, and they're actually preventing us from helping kids today. And so what we've been doing is we've been asked by a number of different government bodies to come and consult with them on developing protocols for helping American teenagers get out of these situations. Because what's happened is, here's what it looks like in the United States. A group of girls are being trafficked in a brothel in Missoula somewhere. They find these kids, and the police do a recovery operation. They go in, rescue these kids out of the situation. They arrest the bad guys. The state's attorney's office begins a criminal prosecution case against the criminals, and the girls are taken to whoever your child protection service is. I don't know what you guys call it here. Every state has it different. CPS, DHS, DCFS, whatever it is. So DCFS goes, okay, so this is a kid who has been involved in sexual abuse. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them in foster care, or we're going to put them in a group home. And 98% of kids that are placed in foster care or group homes run within the first 48 hours. So now they're gone. And this happens cyclically over and over in the United States because there's no good options for adjudicating youth in that process. Now what happens is, in many states, they've left prostitution as a criminal offense or a status offense for a minor. So what they'll do is they'll arrest the bad guys over here, and then they arrest the girls over here, and they put them in juvenile hall to try to provide them with services because it's the only way they can hold on to them long enough to be able to help them. So do you guys see the injustice in that? It's just this enormous problem in the way that we're treating our own children. And so we're trying to help states develop protocols that would be more appropriate. In Cambodia, which is light years away from the United States in terms of infrastructure, just has such a streamlined way of helping kids. Child recovery operation takes place. We meet with our child protection agency. They give us custody and guardianship. We take the kids in. We do coordinated case management with them, so we're not pulling the wool over their eyes. We're sharing with them what our care plans are, what our treatment plans are, where we're moving the kids to. We work with the families. So there's this holistic engagement in helping these kids in the process of healing. And that's what we need here in the United States. And so that's one of the things that we're working on right now, is trying to communicate what those issues are. The other thing is that we get a lot of questions about too, and I think you guys are sort of seeking this as a church, is how do we as a church engage, or how do we get involved in this issue? By a raise of hands, how many of you guys have that question? All right, there's a good number. Okay, I was on the money. And my job, I've been doing this for 10 years, so I've worked with lots of different churches, and there's some advice I would give you guys. And I'm happy to talk to you about this afterwards in more detail, but these are the things that I would say. One is, you as a church body need to spend some time really learning more about this issue. There's some great Christian resources, but I would encourage you to look at some not Christian resources and really get your head around this issue. It's a lot more than just a topic about slavery, and it doesn't have just one answer to it. It's a very complex issue that involves very intelligent engagement. The next thing is I would figure out where God's heart in this church is, whether that's globally or locally or both, and then figuring out, how do I begin to look at this issue? And one of the things I encouraged your pastoral staff in is, if something does come out at you, is I would send a recon team from your church, a group of people that can really dig into prayer and really seeking out, what is God's heart for this issue in this organization. We've had churches that we bring in, and they come and spend a week with us. We introduce them to 6 or 7 different organizations that are doing quality work. really help educate them on the issue of trafficking and how it happens, why it happens, who it's happening to, what organizations are doing, what the results are, and really trying to get your head around it as a church, because I'm sure that you guys aren't looking for a cause to just drop $1 in a bucket over, but you're really looking for something that is going to facilitate the transformation of a human being, something that's really going to change lives and affect this issue in a positive way. And so the two things that I always suggest to people is, one is learn as a church, whether that's doing it corporately or individually, really getting to understand this issue. And I'm happy to provide you guys with like a book and movie list of things that would be awesome to just kind of dig your teeth into. And then next is, get out and meet some of these organizations that are doing work and try to understand the who, what, why, where, how kind of questions. And as a church, figure out, like, what does that engagement look like? Are we going to go on the ground and actually do projects with them? Are we going to provide resources for them? One of the things that we do is we run the Shine Career School. So we bring in professionals throughout the year to teach different topics for vocational training and enrichment classes for our girls. Well, it's a great way to engage churches because people can come over for short periods of time and use their profession, skills, and passions to actually work with survivors in a very, very meaningful way. And I know that other organizations have engagement type opportunities like that your church could be engaged in. So I'd really encourage you guys to begin praying and really looking at kind of what do those next steps look like. So I always like to leave things on a super positive note. One of the things that we've been doing over the last several years is working with an organization called Abolition International. They've been following a lot of the amazing stories of the girls that have graduated from our program, and they sent a video team over to do an enactment of one of the girls that's actually in our program. So I'd love to show you this video in closing. This young lady's name is Saray, which in Cambodian actually means freedom, which is pretty awesome. And this is actually her story. Obviously, it's been dramatized, but I think you guys will enjoy this.
I still remember the flashing lights. The loud music, the beatings shook my body. A Cambodian proverb says, men are like gold, women are like clothes. If you drop gold in the mud, it will come clean, but a cloth stays dirty forever. You lose yourself in those hidden rooms. No longer a name, simply an exchange. A hopelessly soiled clothes, flesh for sale. But then the rescuers came. They found me and brought me out. I have been given much more than just freedom. I was given time and space to come alive again, nurtured by love, encouraged to dream. And I was offered tools to create. I learned how to make beautiful things. how I make beautiful meals and beautiful moments. New memories that echo with laughter and resound with hope. Being renewed is a glorious thing. I am made whole again, a new creation. I am so much more than cloth. I am a jewel, now free to shine.